Hey guys, so what we've got going on here is another replay review. This one is a Storm League game with a few team members um, in a coordinated group. The thing is that some are in voice comms, some are not. So there's a few things, and I'll let the game kind of run because it's kind of boring to just pause it every time at the beginning and talk about it. But there's a few things when you're working with a group that you're queuing in together. If all of your guys' intention is to rank up and not just have fun with friends, not to get carried or anything like that, but if your whole intention is to rank up, by queuing together, you sometimes have a situation where the system will put more difficult. Let me turn this down just a tad. I guess it's not that loud. But you'll have the system where the game will try to put higher MMR people against you. If it can't find people that are equivalent, it assumes that because you guys are more coordinated, you'll probably be better. And so it tries to find people with higher MMR. If you ever play with your friend and you've got two people and you're like, the system always puts higher MMR people against us, it's because it can't find people that match your guys' MMR, and so it averages a little higher because you're in a coordinated environment. I want to start off by saying what you did there was really good. You costed them a full wave of soak, and then you were still able to rejoin your team. This is exactly what I recommend for people like Malthael who can clear waves quickly. Is you should be trying to double soak for the first half of the game, and also the pings telling your team to go to each of those lanes. Like, all of this is really, really smart, and all of this is really, really good. I will say, I don't want you to lose this wave of soak though. Do you see all this soak that you're missing? I would be very cautious. But you chose to go to one lane, told your team to go to another. You still picked up a good portion of the soak. It's not too bad. Perfect. So what I recommend, because you're at a disadvantage with groups, I always recommend that you come up with a little bit of a strategy ahead of time. Even like a two-person combo that you guys can recognize, hey, we're going to play, I want to be playing Malthael. What if we could have our healer play Ana, and when team fights start getting hectic, you nano boost the Malthael? It's a really strong combo. You don't need to communicate it too much, but it can make a huge difference. Or even something as simple as, I'll get camps, and I don't really need assistance during this. If you guys would like, just make sure that we're soaking every lane, right? Having a little bit of communication beforehand could make a huge difference, even if everyone's not in comms, because they know what to look out for. One of my favorite combos is Joanna's Blessed Shield with Light Bomb, because Joanna will stun 3 people, and then Light Bomb goes, and you can scoop everyone up with your Condemn right before the Light Bomb explodes. I love that combo, and it works really well, and it doesn't require a lot of communication. So I'm not telling you guys to do that combo, but think about that when you go in. You can easily tell someone, hey, every time that I do Blessed Shield, Light Bomb me. And you don't need any communication in the game. So if not everyone's in team comms, come up with plans ahead of time. Now, to get into this game, I'll talk a little bit about your guys' team comp, and I'll talk about what you can do differently to add more value. Right now, I'm going to say you're playing the early game pretty well. Every time that you push a wave like this, and this wave dies to a wall, you're costing them soak. Now, in this case, it looks like they might be able to catch it, but you're costing them soak. This is a weird fight right now because you were missing a couple of members of the team, but it looks like they're matching you, right? They've got a Raynor top where your Tassadar was top. They've got a Diablo mid where your Tychus is mid. So it should be a 3v3 down here, and it looks like no one in your team's taken too much damage, so you should be okay just going in. And the fewer people that are in a fight, the better Malthael is. And I know it sounds like it would be the opposite purely because the more people he hits with his damage over time is better. But Malthael is one of those that he heals the longer the fight's going on. So if the enemies don't have enough damage to burst you, they can never kill you. So if you're fighting like 2 to 3 people as Malthael, it's kind of one of the best situations. Oh, I would be actually fighting this. But it's one of the best situations to be in purely because they don't have enough damage to burst you. Because they don't have enough damage to burst you, you can drain them forever. Do you see how they can't kill you? So against 3 people, this is kind of Malthael's best situation. I know, again, I'm going to have commenters going like, don't you want the trade on all 5 of the enemy members of their team? Like, yeah, ideally you would. But that also is your riskiest time as well. So this is kind of better to be like, oh, definitely don't be fighting under tower. The only way Malthael dies is to burst, or like just CC lock, or like anti-heal, but the burst is the most common way. And so those fights are great. You want to be fighting like even 1v3, but like 3v3s, you're in a great spot. 5v5s are challenging. You almost want to be getting enough macro to where the enemies have to answer the 5v5s, so that, or sorry, have to answer all the macro, that you get to force a fight that's like a 5v4 or even like a 3v4, where you're a lot more favorable. So this early game is perfect. Wipe a wave, move to another lane. Wipe a wave, move to another lane. We do have an objective spawning, and the siege spawned a little after the timer started. Okay, this is a little risky. I would pop the, oh, you went Touch of Death. What did you go? What? Oh, you went on a Pale Horse. On a Pale Horse is fine. There's definitely nothing wrong with it, especially if you're moving from lane to lane really quickly. I personally recommend for a lot of players, if you're going W build, you need to take the range, because it just synergizes really well. And if you're not going W build, I like to go Fear the Reaper, because it allows you to have an escape. And on a map like this, I think it's fine to go die alone. But I generally, if I'm going against a team like this, I'm probably going W build. More often than Q build, but I will say Q build's a little bit easier if you're not sure like what your healer is going to do, because Q build is a lot more healing, where W build is a lot more damage. So you decide which one you want. Do you want to be able to stay in a fight longer, or do you want to be able to drop like their front line really quickly? Last Rites is good. They do have the potential of Palm. So before taking Last Rites, I'll just keep it going, but before taking Last Rites, I generally would recommend not doing it this way. I would hold it, right? Because you want to see, and that was a good Last Rites, by the way, but you want to see if he takes Palm, and this guy would have taken this anyways, but sometimes if you hold it, you can see what he's taking first, because you could shift, especially in W build, you can shift to Tormented Souls and not lose any power. In fact, W build generally goes Tormented Souls because this resets your W. And so you could start W build and decide which one you want to go. Now in Q build, you generally are going to go Last Rites. You don't need Tormented Souls in Q build. It does kind of synergize well if you're going to go like the physical armor, because most of their damage is physical damage, right? They've got Raynor, they've got Sonya. But yeah. So, in team fights, the big thing to know about Malthael, he is squishy, he dies to burst, he dies to CC. You need to approach team fights from a flank. If you're approaching from the same angle that your team's approaching for, you're too squishy. You're going to get hit by everything that's aimed at you and everything that's aimed at your team together, and it's not worth it. You want the enemies to throw some abilities at your team so you can go in, get some damage, and then get out. And then you want to wait for them to throw abilities at your team, go in, do some damage, and get out. You should be kind of like going in and out of fights, because Malthael needs short fights that he can gain a lot of life back and be safe that the enemies have abilities on cooldown. In 5v5s, you cannot just walk into a fight. In 3v3s, you can. You could just stay in a fight forever, like I said. But in 5v5s, you need to approach fights with a lot of care. So, I'll continue playing this, and we can kind of go from there. Staying in here to prevent some of the damage going to your ETC is okay, but when the ETC gets out, I'll leave. Getting away from APOC is good, and you're melting enough people. And this is why I said 3v3s are great. Do you see how Raynor's focusing only on you, and you're out healing the damage of Raynor? That's perfect. You want to be fighting in fights like this, where they're dealing damage to you, but you're healing more than what they're doing. But you got to be careful when there's more people in the fight. In this case, the fight's pretty safe for you, because the enemies are not all focusing one target. They're spreading their focus out a little too much. I would just stay in the fight. You guys have killed enough that they don't have enough damage to kill you, but you are burning out of your mana pretty quickly. So you might not be able to kill this person. I will say Wraith striking when you're low on mana, if you're not in W build, is not worth it. It's 95 damage, where your Q is 160 damage. Wraith Strike should not be used because also Soul Rip is 25 mana, Wraith Strike's 30. If you're getting low on mana, Wraith Strike is a waste of mana. Honestly, your E is also a waste of mana too. It's 50 mana. So when you start running it to about half mana, if you're going to continue a fight, you want to avoid using your W and your E. And since you're already out of mana, you definitely didn't want to go back into this fight. You should be able to get out. I wouldn't continue fighting because, I mean, you'll get one more Q off. There's a world that maybe that Q does enough, but he still has his fountain. So you back up, and now you don't have enough mana to fight. You do not re-enter this fight. So you need to decide, if you can't re-enter this fight, how do you get value? And can you get any value before you back? I know this is going to sound like a strange recommendation, but because you have on a pale horse, you can move around the map very quickly. I don't have enough mana to join this fight again. Mid is going to be cleared by Tassadar. So I would actually go top. I would push one wave, and then I would back. The reason I would do this, and I know this would take a lot longer, but the reason I would do this is it would cost them one. In fact, it would cost them 2 waves. You see these 2 waves right here? It costs them 2 waves of soak. At this level, it's about half a... I would say it's like 75% of a kill. And then you could back. Then you could come back, and this wave's going to be like still dying to this. They're going to still be distracted from like mid and everything. And then you could come back and go for this. But with 0 mana, there's nothing you can do to help your team other than either back to get enough mana or go top to push a wave and then back to get enough mana. I personally would go top. And this is something that I feel helped me when I was on my Smurf accounts is I decided if I'm not going to be able to do anything for a little bit because I'm going to have to back, is there anything I can do safely before I back that would set me up to have a back that gives more value? This would be a back that gives more value. If you could push this wave out, you'd get a bunch of experience, and then you'd cost the enemies a bunch of experience, and then you could back, and there would be nothing to do while you're backing. Tassadar is going to deal with this. This is already pushed out. The enemies will probably go for their boss, and you can't do a boss with 0 mana. So you push out top, and then when you get your mana back, you guys could potentially grab a bruiser and go for boss. But they're going to grab this and they're going to go for boss, most likely. Knowing how many people they've killed and the type of comp that they have, they're going to go for boss right after. But you can't do anything to join your team here. So there's no point in hesitating. You should immediately go to top. I mean, you could clear this, but Tassadar already has it, right? Your goal, if you're ever in Storm League, your goal should always be getting as much value as possible on your own. If your team's ever doing something, you don't want to be there. This is a waste of time. You should be pushing or getting Bruiser Camp, costing them more experience. The second you realize a fight is lost, you should never rejoin it as a soul laner. Soul laners are all about getting value. I always tell people the second that a fight's already won or the second a fight's already lost, you should be gone. And that's a lost fight is not when the fight is over. A lost fight is when there's really no way to come back in that fight. So if you ever are on like like say you're on Infernal Shrines, the enemy has 30 souls and you have 0 and they kill 1 person, you're not going to sit there and try to steal souls when you know you're not going to get it, or the Skeletal Defenders or whatever. You're not going to try to steal them because you know you're not going to be able to get it. So you immediately leave and you start double soaking while they're waiting for those last 10 Skeletal Defenders, and while they're getting ready for it to spawn and enter lane, and while it's approaching the gates, you could grab 2 to 4 waves of experience if you leave early. So right as you lose 2 members of your team, you should be gone, getting advantages. All right, it's boss versus boss. You go in, hit a good ult, and they have no tank. They have enough damage to kill you, but they're not focusing on you, so you're safe to just keep fighting here. That was a really good Touch of Death. I don't generally recommend Shroud of Wisdom. So the reason I don't recommend Shroud is because it says after 2 seconds, gain spell armor for 4 seconds. The only time you know you're about to take spell damage is generally right before a burst, and that's usually hard to predict 2 seconds out. 50 spell armor is awesome, don't get me wrong. And I think you probably took it against Nazeebo because of the ult he took and the fact that his abilities are generally delayed. But if his toads hit you before you get this off, it's not going to reduce the damage over time. It only reduces it before you get that instance of damage. So that's why I generally recommend against it. Inevitable End's usually the go-to. You see an APOC coming out, you can't get out of the way, you pop it, you get unstoppable. Or I like to go physical armor, right? You're going to be applying dot to 2 to 3 people. That's 10 to 20 physical armor, and a lot of their damage is physical. I mean, his physical, Sonya's is half physical, Raynor's is mostly physical. Or if you're Q build, you go Soul Siphon. You heal more, right? So you increase the healing to 4.75% of their health instead of, I believe it's 4. Which, that increase is pretty significant. Again, be very careful about how you approach this fight. Approach from a flank. They're actually kind of split here, though. You could probably just go right in. You could pop your Shroud of Wisdom, so you don't take, yeah, so you take less damage from the Vigo ult. Yeah, this is... You honestly are playing team fights really well. You're staying right in... You are using your W and your E too much. I do wonder, would you take it... oh, 7 he took. You could potentially go cold. Were you worried... What were you worried about for healing? Just Diablo? I think that's fine. Yep, and this is great. You notice you've already lost the fight. You immediately leave. Okay, but before you back, think about it again. Think about this for just a second. If you back now, how much experience are you missing? You're going to miss a full wave of experience. But if you clear the wave first, because you're going to have the wave that's sitting here, and you're also going to have the second wave right here, you have enough mana to clear both of those waves. So if you clear those first and then you back, then there's nothing to do in this wave throughout the entire tribute, right? And you'll be able to back and not miss any soak. So do you want to miss 2 waves of soak? And do you want to back and miss 2 waves of soak? Or do you want to get 2 waves? Now, this situation is one where, to be honest, it's going to turn off your structures because of the tribute. So you'll be able to get this wave of soak anyways, but it's a good habit to get into, of getting the wave before you back so that there's nothing to do. When you're backing, you should leave base before you should be like on your way someplace, because you do regen mana as you're walking. So you want to go just get to about 80%, but you were typing. Still, you should be typing while moving. This game's all about activity. Especially when you're playing someone like Malthael, it's all about activity. Solo laners in general, it's all about keeping up with every second of your game should be used in some effective manner. And that's why I say, like, when team fights are lost, you should already be gone. You don't ever kill her. You just keep focusing on soak. Yeah, the reason you don't ever kill her is because of her movement speed. I mean, I guess you could use W to keep trying to keep up with her, but I don't know. This might be like a bit much. You could ult. Now they have no healer. Now you win this. You could fight both of them. Is he going to mosh? Yeah, I was about to say, that's a good mosh. A lot of people are afraid to do these moshes because they think a mosh should hit multiple people. But solo moshes on tanks are actually really, really nice, especially late game. People don't realize how long death timers are late game. And in this case, even just burning souls is worth so much. But yeah, you are burning through your mana real quick. Let's take a peek at the rest of your build. You're going a pretty standard Q build, right? Soul Collector got a light buff. Not the talent itself, but kind of they buffed his trait in a way. So Q build got a decent buff. This is a while back, but so you're going basic Q build. Q build for me is when I don't need to get through percentage of health as much. Yeah, again, these are the fights where it's like your team's fighting without you over in a. So the way I value this. I always tell people, when you're fighting over something, imagine you're spending coins for a chance to win something. And the more coins you spend, the higher chance of winning something. And then imagine everything that you're fighting over gives you coins back. Coins are the abilities you're using and um and the time you're spending on it, right? And imagine how many coins does a siege camp give back? Probably not very much. And imagine that when you're higher level, you have to spend more coins to do stuff. Imagine spending like 800 coins worth of ults and time in game. Because imagine you could be clearing this, you could be pushing this, you could be getting a siege camp, you could potentially be going for a bruiser camp in 12 seconds. So if you would have gotten this siege bruiser, you would have been very set up for this next objective. Your team members that would have died would be back up by the time the next objective spawns. And so all in all, you would have just been better in every way by not joining your team here and by spending your coins on getting map advantage so that it would be easier to win the next objective rather than spending all your coins on an objective that you're already losing, that even if you won this objective, siege camp, you wouldn't have gained very much. So try to value out what you're doing. Now, this is also a great selling point for if you are queuing with 4 people and you said some are in comms and some are not in comms, this is a great time to say, hey, we probably should be in comms if we want to be playing Storm League, you know? Like, if we want to just play quick match, we can. Just kind of learn new heroes or whatever, but yeah, that's real bad. So now they're going to get your boss, and you're not set up, right? You're worried about even clearing up this camp because you don't know where they are. And so now they're also going to get the siege camp, or the bruiser camp, which is what you should have been able to get, you know? This is why, as a solo laner, you need to make a lot of quick decisions on when you're joining teams and when you're not joining teams. And every second of your time needs to be effectively used. You're just waiting for 20s. They don't get anything from this objective, so I'd almost skip this objective because they're going to be grouped as 5s as 20 as well. Are they pushing? Okay, so there actually is 4. And your 20s, you could fight this. I wouldn't do this boss right now. I mean, you can. You do need to clear up this too. So yeah, you'll probably just have to give up a lot. Just clear up everything. Your boss clear is actually really not that great because your percent health per target is only 2% per second. Tychus does more than 2% of its health per second. The rest of your abilities are AoE, so believe it or not, Malthael, despite having percent health rate, is not the greatest at killing individual targets. Yeah, they're going to get boss. That's okay. You guys will work on clearing up boss. Your job, because you clear bosses slow, is to get value elsewhere. So you're going to go up here and maybe grab one wave and then back. You could join your team just to play it safe. Level 20, most people go no one can stop death. There are arguments for Final Curtain. There are arguments for Angel of Death. You generally don't want to take Reaper of Souls because it messes up the combo. But there are arguments for every talent. You guys could even give this one if you want to, just to play it safe, because you don't want to get there late and have them all be sitting in a bush ready to kill like the first person walking in. What are the timers for everything? They're going to get a bruiser camp in a minute. They're going to get a siege camp in 15 seconds. That's okay, as long as you guys are okay to clear them. Both the bosses are down, so that threat's off the map. The bruiser camp is not up for a bit. Siege camp's up in a minute. You honestly just want to be grouped up right now. No, there's no keeps down, so you guys are even on all the minions that are going to be pushing. You want to be grouped up. As a solo laner, you want to kind of stay away from your team and add pressure until about level 16, and then you want to be by default with your team unless there are major things that you need to do. Then you ping away your team. But even right here, yes, there's a catapult. I would almost just kill the catapult, and then I would leave. Like, you could kill the whole wave, but the worry is, watch what's going to happen, right? There's an objective spawning. The enemy team doesn't need to be anywhere, right? They could be over here and be working on this siege camp, and it would be pretty valuable, but they really don't need to be there. They were all just mid, so most likely they're all chilling here or they're all chilling here. If Tychus starts walking in alone without the tank going in first or without you checking the bush with your E, then Tychus just dies, and then you guys are fighting without someone. So if you're gonna clear this, you need to be pinging retreat pings all around here. because you don't want him to walk in first. We still have 18 seconds until this tribute spawns. So you should be surrounding him in white flags, basically. Just V pings all the way up here, and maybe a warning ping or something, a danger ping or whatever, you know? You need to make sure that they are not walking up here. I'm not even checking vision of the opposing team, because if the opposing team is here, then they're doing it wrong. And if the opposing team is here, we need to be playing as if they are here, even if they're not here. So sure, if this Tychus is smart, he might walk up to here and throw a grenade here, and then he'll mount back up. I might even dismount if I'm Tychus right now, so that I'll have my mount off cooldown by the time I throw my grenade. And then I'd throw my grenade here to reveal the bush. And then if I see 3 people in that bush, I just dash away, and then I mount back up. ETC needs to go in first, and you need to be ready to follow up very quickly after. There's also a chance that like the Banshee's here, so that they could follow up with a leap and an APOC. So that's why it's even risky to do this. But if he has grenade build, he could throw the grenade from far enough away that it should be okay. Or he might even be able to see the Banshee as he walks up. But yeah, you got to be with your team. Level 20 is very crucial to have the soul laners with the team. I think it's okay to kill the catapult and potentially the wave too, so that your lane will have a catapult, but theirs won't. Oh well, theirs still will, because the way that it times. But yeah. Yeah, Tychus just face checked that bush. Alright, yikes. Alright, you got to be with your team. Really important. You might lose mid keep, but that's okay. This is really important. If you back for top keep, you're going to lose more than top keep. So you have to stay and fight. Pick half your health. You just pick up one of these and you'll full heal. Yep. You got to flank. You got to go in by a flank. Because here's what's happening. You're getting hit by the abilities that are aimed at your team. And abilities that are aimed at you, even if you dodge, are going to hit your team. This is why you should always approach as a flank. For most solo laners. Most solo laners should be approaching from a flank. You should be approaching from over here, so that the abilities are not naturally, they have to make a conscious decision. Are they throwing abilities at you? Or are they throwing abilities at your team? Now, the risk about doing this is that if they decide to leap onto you, you just die, right? If you win inevitable end, you could unstoppable the leap and walk away. But you should be approaching from a flank, and you should just throw E's and then walk away, and throw E's and walk away. And if the enemies start approaching you, then your ETC has an opening to go in for their backline. So if Diablo tries to go for you, and if Sonya starts going for you, then ETC can go in, right? And then they'll have fewer interrupts for Mosh. If he moshes the Rainer and both of these go for you, then you guys win the team fight. But if both of these, if you're in the middle of your team and both of these go for your team, they're going to stun your entire team and you're just going to die. So that's why you need to approach it a flank, because if they throw every ability, and the other reason, if they throw every ability at you, oh, well, let's say you went no one can stop death. They throw every ability at you. You just instantly respawn and use on a pale horse to get back. And they've used everything. You mosh them, and then you show up at the end of the fight, and you can lead to another kill. So that's part of the other reason why you want to be approaching as a flank, is Malthael specifically. Do you see how Sonya's doing it? How, like, they're all here and Sonya's over here, because if we throw abilities on Sonya, they just dive in, and if we throw abilities on them, then Sonya just dives in. You should be doing the same exact thing. So their solo laner's positioning is so much better. Do you see how you got hit by the same stun that your team got hit by? This should not be happening the way that it's happening. Sonya positioned correctly there, and you did not. Don't get me wrong, you played the early game of this game perfectly. Like, there were only a few areas where you could have fixed, like, slight things, like just to get one extra wave before you back or whatever. You played the early game great. You played the mid game pretty well. I would say how you approach team fights in the mid game was really good. But approaching fights in the late game and knowing when there's specific macro to do, you need to adjust your strategy. It's not even, I mean, it is kind of his fault. If I watched every other player on your team, I'm sure I could find things as well. And same thing with the players in the opposing team. There's always areas to improve for everyone, but for you, there were positioning differences that would have led to your team winning that team fight, or at least breaking even in that team fight rather than just getting stomped. And look who died, right? Like I said, if you position the way that you should position, you'll most likely die, but it would lead to a winning team fight. And look who died. Sonya died, but it led to a winning team fight. So you would have died, leading to a winning team fight. Or both of you did that at the exact same time, and it was break even. You die, Sonya dies, you revive, and you get back to the fight on time, and then you win the team fight, and you win the game. Right? That's why it's so important to position at a flank as a solo laner, because you can bring so much threat alone. Most solo laners are these heavy bruiser types that bring a lot to a team fight. And by being separated from your team, there's always a risk about throwing all the abilities at the team when there's a solo laner that can really mess with your team. Especially this team, they even if they went in with Leap and APOC, you know this Nazeebo and this Raynor have been focusing you most of the fights. So all you had to do was survive long enough to keep the damage away. Your team would have survived because there would have been no damage to kill your team after the leap and after the APOC. So once both of those ended, your team would have been fine. You would have killed their frontliners. You would have died. You would have revived, and they would have no frontline, and your team would be probably half health, killing their backline. And then you could re-enter the fight even if a couple members of your team die. You could re-enter, kill them, get the curse, and you guys could. I mean, you would if you were the last one up to get the curse, you would just grab both the cams probably, as your minions kill like one of the keeps, and then you could maybe set up for like a boss afterwards. But put simply, your late game team fights you need to approach differently. You need to be pinging your team a little bit more when you don't want them to do things. Your Tychus face checking this bush was terrifying. Because if the enemies were where they were supposed to be, they were just mid. If I rewound to that time to see where they went, I bet they went back here, grabbed vision, and then they ran over here. When they should have just gone right up here and then had all been sitting in this bush. Right as Tychus would go to face check, he would be slammed by Diablo, he'd be flipped and just killed immediately, and your team would have lost without that fight even starting. And so you need to be VPinging that. There's a lot of things that you need to be double checking and be willing to adapt to. But I would say your early game played perfectly. Soak a lane, go to a different lane. See if you can get some value in that other lane. Soak that lane, go back to the first lane. Do that for the first half of the game. If every lane's being soaked, grab camps. Malthael is one of the few heroes that you can grab a wave of soak, grab a camp, and then come back and catch the next wave of soak without missing any experience. So do those things, and you'll find yourself winning more games than not on Malthael. Then change your team fight approach to be more of a flank, and you'll be succeeding in more team fights. During the early to mid game, take any fight that's not a 5v5. Like you want to take anytime that they don't have all 5 of their members, they generally won't have enough damage to kill you. Especially if they've got like 2 frontliners. In this case, they had 3. So all of that was pretty good. Early mid game, keep playing it the way that you're playing it. Late game, approach from a flank and stick with your team a little bit more. And not like stick to them. I'm just meaning be close enough to your team that if a team fight starts, you're right there in the late game, because 16 to 20 team fights are game ending. And so you want to be near your team. You want to set up when you know the enemies are split up. You want to set up for objectives and apply pressure. But when all the enemies are grouped up, you need to all be grouped up as well. Hopefully this helps you out, and hopefully this helps anyone else out that's looking to learn a little bit more about solo laners or Malthael specifically. Gives you an idea. There are 2 major builds that are popular with Malthael right now. Level 1, you can take whatever you want, depends on the map. W is favored in W build, but in Q build, you're safe to take anything. You're even safe to take anything in W build. Level 4, if you need to win your lane, die alone is generally taken. If you have the opportunity to kill people in rotations, die alone is taken. If you're going W build, throwing shade is usually taken. And if none of those things apply, Black Harvest is being taken. And then when you get to level 7, all of these talents are good, but if you're going W build, you have to take Massacre. It's a requirement. Level 10, if you're W build, you can take either or, but it's heavily favored to take Tormented Souls because of the combo. What the combo basically is you will Wraith Strike in, pop Tormented Souls, Wraith Strike again, doing what would it be the equivalent of about, it's a little more than 16% of the enemy's max health because you're also doing W damage. And And then what'll happen is the Tormented Souls will end in 4 seconds, which your cooldown of Ray Strike is 5. So you get a Ray Strike cooldown in 4 seconds. So you get 3 Ray Strikes off within 4 seconds, if you can do it correctly. That comes out to be a large portion of their health, like 24% of their health right at the start of a fight, which is kind of overwhelming, plus all the extra burn damage. So it ends up looking more like about 50% of their entire frontline's health in 4 seconds, which is crazy high. No hero can really do that to frontliners other than Malthael. Maybe Mephisto in the perfect situation, but it's so rare to do that much damage. And that's usually game changing. So that's why W build works if they have like a really beefy frontline, like either like tank bruiser or they've got like double tank, or even 3 frontliners is probably the best to do that. Q build is if the team comp is a little bit more open and if they don't have a lot of burst or anti-heal. And then this build is pretty straightforward. You go Q, level 4 you go touch, or you go cold hands. Cold hands allows you to really chase down someone. Like if you find that the enemies are going to try to double soak, I love doing this on Towers of Doom against Azul. I love going die alone and going cold hands, and whenever he tries to rotate, say he's going from like top to mid, I just follow him the whole way, slowing him, auto attacking him, and using die alone. And by the time he gets to mid, he's at like 20% health, and so he can't stay. And so I love doing Malthael versus a Azul, and then just taking both of those talents. But hopefully that gives you an idea. And then Q build, you just take Soul Collector. Level 4, I generally take Inevitable End. Because you're so susceptible to burst and CC, that if you pop this ahead of the first CC that they're going to throw, they usually can't do anything. So this is usually popped before you even apply Reaper's Marks, which is why the second part of that doesn't matter. And it's also great for escapes too. I love Fear the Reaper plus Inevitable End, because if you pop both at the same time, you can get away from almost any fight. Because they can't body block you. You're moving faster and you're unstoppable, so they can't CC you, so you can get away from almost any fight. And then finally, level 20, you generally are going to be taking No One Can Stop Death, because it allows you to take riskier plays and then come back. And at level 20, one winning team fight is usually game changing. So if your death leads to a winning team fight and you're still alive, you basically can always end the game. The No One Can Stop Death is just game changing. Level 16, W build requires Mortality. Q build requires Soul Collector. The Memento Mori did get a little bit of a buff, but I still don't recommend it because it doesn't start proccing for 4 seconds. So not only do you need to stay in the fight for quite a while, you generally are... The damage buff is generally happening too late in the team fight. Late game team fights are decided in 3 seconds. Not finished in 3 seconds, but they're generally decided in 3 seconds. So if you're taking talents that take longer than 3 seconds to ramp up, you're generally going to be falling short. Hopefully this helps everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to join the Discord. You can always reach out. Thank you all, and feel free to check out my other videos.